Right, well, welcome. And this is informal. And what I'll do is as soon as Laura introduces herself and then Barry, the questions that were pre-submitted, and so everybody can follow them, I'll put them in the chat so everyone sees what was pre-submitted. Now, I didn't have Linda's, but now we'll make sure we ask that we talk about that at the end. And then if there's something that anyone from the floor has to add in any of the questions, in this, again, we're here to mentor one another, to help one another, and so feel free to add something to the responses that our experts have given us. So with that, Laura, please introduce yourself, and everyone welcome again to Just Ask TCI on navigating uncomfortable conversations. You're up, Laura.
Okay, great. So my name is Laura Berger. I'm the founder and principal of Berdero Group. We do leadership development and executive coaching for across many constituencies, from healthcare to actually education and manufacturing and so forth. And I'm also a forum facilitator for TCI, for Forum 4. And this topic is something that will forever challenge us because we're human. And when we're dealing with conflict, we're dealing with emotion. And several years ago, I wrote a piece for Forbes called, and it was 5 conflict management strategies. And it still is to this day one of the top read of my Forbes pieces. So that tells you how relevant this is. And it's becoming even more difficult because of the fact that we are in a virtual environment. So it's easier for all of us to avoid conflict, going back to what more, I believe Jessica was talking about avoidance and Maureen was talking about avoidance. So, you know, I hope that today, my wish for all of you today is that you walk away with one specific tactic, something very tangible for you to incorporate into these conversations.
Thank you. Barry.
So my name is Barry Schanerman, and I have twofold business. One is the Thrive Group, where we work with entrepreneurs who want to earn more, work less, and enjoy the journey. And then my second business is Your Meeting Place, where I work with individuals and groups who are interested in learning more about living and leading with Intenergy, which is what are the intentions behind your energy, and then understanding what needs to be met in the moment. And so a lot of my work is done using emotional intelligence, energy leadership, and my newest one is unconscious motivators, which I find fascinating. And so just really helping people to communicate better and understand some of what they feel but don't really understand, and how to, you know, think about others first and what their needs might be in the moment.
Great. So thank you. So I keep myself straight. We'll start with Laura for the first question, then Barry will give her response, and then I'll flip-flop it with the second question to keep me in line and in order and in a pattern. I like to have patterns. That's the way I remember things. And if one of you feels that, you know, there's answered it sufficiently, please feel free to say so. And if someone else would like to add something to the question, where this is informal, it's our opportunity to share. So first question, and I did put them in the chat as well. How do I prepare for a difficult conversation? And Laura, we're starting with you.
Oh, you're starting with me.
B comes before S, and that's the only way I can remember it.
Okay, so how do you prepare for a difficult conversation? That's a loaded question, because what is getting in the way of this conversation? Are you emotional about it? And what's driving that emotion? And what I would say, not knowing the depth of that question, is I would ask yourself, what is the self-limiting belief that is ruminating in your head, whatever that may be? And maybe that's, oh, I'm terrible at conflict. Oh, I cry when I get into conflict with someone. Whatever that self-limiting belief is, identify it, and then ask yourself, what do I appreciate about resolution? So look at the outcome that you're trying to create. So what is it about resolution that I'm appreciative of? Maybe it's something that, you know, you don't have clarity on. What do I appreciate about, you know, knowing or having certainty? So focus on the outcome that you're trying to create for yourself. And that's going to help you move into the space with a more positive outlook versus a negative, oh my goodness, this is going to happen or this is going to happen. So I think that that's the first key to it.
Right, thank you. Barry.
So when...
Excuse me, should we be concerned that it says FBI surveillance down below?
Yes, if that person can please identify themselves. Hello, who is FS?
You can remove them, Lori.
I just did.
Oh,
I
they're
just
gone.
removed
Yeah.
them. That is a little bizarre.
Hey, that was,
Sorry, I just wanted
like,
to make sure we weren't.
Thank you. No, yes, that is bizarre.
That's
Okay.
crazy.
Barry.
Okay, so first of all, I agree with everything Laura said. And I guess the way I usually approach a difficult conversation and, you know, help people to think about it is to have a clear strategy of what you'd like the end to look like and how you want to show up to the conversation and the atmosphere that you're committed to keeping throughout the conversation, which sometimes starts with, you know, upfront kind of laying out intentions of what you'd like this to look like. Because I think emotions can hijack the best of us, no matter how much, you know, we try, because we are human, as Laura said. And so just being very clear about how you want to show up and even how you're going to signal yourself when you feel like you're moving into territory that you don't want to move into. That's pretty much keeping the end in mind and what needs to happen to get there.
Right. And go ahead.
I just want to, so because we're a small group, Tracy, you had mentioned that you're, you know, in a male-dominated environment, and what comes to mind, I have a client who is a partner at a accounting firm, a large accounting firm, and she's, you know, came into the partnership where it's very all men in this partnership, and bringing her voice forward was a challenge for her, especially when it came to difficult conversations, especially with COVID and the direction that they were taking, the whole team and the you know, office. And our conversations, what helped her bring her voice forward is identifying what makes her unique in the room and why her voice matters in that room. And that kind of speaks to diversity, equity, and inclusion too. And so for you specifically, if you can think about, you know, the power that you bring to that room in terms of perspective, diversity of thought, gender difference, that's a beautiful place for you to position yourself. And people will respect and value that because you're in that room for a reason. I mean, you're an equity partner. So it's even slightly different because she was moving in, she was the lowest partner on the totem pole for her. And they very much appreciated, even though she was quiet, when she spoke, it was powerful. So think about that for yourself.
It's interesting that you say that, because I did get advice from Julia Clima Serrano, who I think you know. And she gave me advice that has worked several times, and I catch myself sometimes. And she said, take the emotion out of it and talk in facts, which is exactly what you said. You know, like Tracy, you know what you bring to the table. So make sure that that's your sweet spot, right? That you're talking about what you are bringing to the table, why you're at the table, and remove the emotion. Don't respond to things in how it makes you feel, but how what you know adds to the conversation, the issue, the whatever. So I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you.
And Lori,
And before we move on, I see Genevieve joined us. Hi, Genevieve and Carolina. And we have one number. If you would just please identify yourself. I don't recognize. It's 305-586-9505.
This is Carolina Rivas. This is my guest. I invited her. I
Perfect.
didn't register her at the beginning when I registered, but I sent an email asking if she could join too.
Perfect. We just wanted to know who was on.
Absolutely. No, I
Thank
recognize the name, the number, and it's Tracy Cochran. I had sent an email asking if she could be added.
Perfect. Thank you. And if you just briefly want to tell everyone who you are before we move to the next question, just really briefly too, and same with Genevieve.
That's with me, with Carolina?
Yep.
Okay, I'm Carolina Rivas. I apologize for joining late. Tracy and I worked together and we were in another meeting that was running late. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer for BCI Securities. It's a registered investment advisor and broker dealer in Miami, Florida. I started attending TCI meetings probably a year ago. I have not been very frequent, but I value the minds that come together, the common issues, and the opportunity to hear this type of dialogue. So I look forward to the event.
Great. Thank you. And really briefly, hi Sharon, how are you? Thanks for joining us. Great. Okay, next question. And we'll
Lori,
yes.
I just wanted to go back to what Jessica had
Sure.
mentioned about wanting to know when to have, whether to just bring it up or not. And I just wanted, something that I always think about and advise people is, why are you bringing this up? Is there, really questioning what your intention is for bringing it up? And sometimes that'll give you the answer to whether it needs to be brought up or not.
Great, thank you. So, and our next question is about conflict. I do not like conflict. How can I stay in charge of myself and my emotional energy? How do I keep my cool?
And I think you want me to go first this time?
Sure.
Okay. So when I think about that question, it's really thinking about your best self qualities and what you need to believe to show up that way. And also being aware of what triggers you. And so how do you maybe think about before the conversation what kind of triggers might be setting you off and how you want to work with that. And again, have a signal to give yourself that, when you feel like you're in that space and when you feel yourself reacting, deciding what you are feeling and what you need at that moment, and trying to take, like Tracy just shared, take the emotion out of it and share the fact of what you need to be able to bring yourself back into a level space.
Thank you. Laura.
In not sounding redundant with what Barry just said, we live in a world of assumptions. Like that's our reality, is our world of assumptions. And understanding, how am I falsely supporting the assumption? So, because you may be thinking it is a fact because you want to support an assumption. One of the things that humans are challenged with, the number one thing, can anyone guess what it is? What is the number one thing that we struggle with? What do you think it is?
Creating a story that's not there.
It's the addiction to being right. That's the number one thing, the addiction to being right. And so you're going to be supporting look at our, not to go into politics, but look at our political environment. It's the addiction to be right. And so it's looking at those assumptions and noticing, oh, how am I supporting my assumptions? And why is that important? It's important because when you go into that conversation, you need to understand, are the questions that you're asking, are you leading the witness? Are you leading the witness? If you're leading the witness, you're moving into a positional conversation. You're moving into the right and wrong, you're supporting your viewpoint, and that is not going to bring you to the desired outcome that you're trying to create.
Is that the same as unconscious bias?
There are, well, unconscious bias goes, I believe, yes, and I cannot speak to that, you know, from an expert perspective. There's so much depth to unconscious bias. I do believe that it more speaks to confirmation bias versus unconscious bias. So you're asking questions to confirm your point of view. And sometimes it's unconscious. Sometimes you're not even aware of it.
I always forget that term, right? It's when you have a belief and you're looking for people to prove what you believe, right? Isn't that what confirmation is?
Yeah, confirmation bias.
And then what's the workaround? Is it the tell me more questions? Is that, I mean, what?
Well, so I can give you an example last week that kind of speaks with what Carla was talking about. I mean, DEI right now is a very emotionally driven topic in organizations. And one of the partners that I spoke with last week, she's charged to do this, and she is a minority herself. She's Asian female. And one of the other partners, who is a white female, said to her that she felt that she was projecting her opinions on others as it related to DEI. And what came out of that conversation and moving through it is neither of them had an idea of what success looked like in terms of a DEI strategy. So the question became, how would you describe success? Like, how would you describe success? Now, that's not leading the witness, because this woman that I was speaking to, this client, she didn't know the answer to that question because she's asking this other partner, what does success look like to you? So it's creating a common ground because they're both working in the DEI world together. It's just this woman is looking at the other partner going, oh, you're projecting onto me. And what came out of that is there was a lot of fear and discomfort for this female white partner who didn't feel that, you know, white privilege, all those things are coming forward now. So, I mean, this is a conflict that is bubbling up in so many different ways. And we're seeing it more and more as we're having these very emotionally driven conversations.
Yeah. Next question, and Laura, we'll start with you. How do I begin the difficult conversation or uncomfortable conversation?
How do you begin it? Open-ended questions, very outcome focused. What does success look like to you? What would great look like? Like going into a conversation with someone where whatever the topic is at hand, you saying simply, what would great look like? Open-ended, non-positional is how I would describe it. That's how you can go into it, because you're also accessing your prefrontal cortex now, right? Versus the amygdala and the primitive brain. Your fight, flight, and shut down. So if you're asking, hey, what would great look like? Now you're opening up for them.
Right. I'll have to write those down. Bari.
So I kind of thought about that question because it's a really open-ended question. But one of the things I like to go into a conversation with is assuming positive intent, because sometimes that right off the bat can change the trajectory of where it goes, and to seek to understand rather than judging. We MSU stuff all the time, which is make stuff up, sorry. And so really just trying to ask the question before you even start. I like what Laura said about, focusing on an outcome. What would great look like? What kind of success would you like? Asking questions to hear the story, because you may hear assumptions in there. You may hear limiting beliefs in there. Staying curious, let the person come to some realizations through your questionings, and being comfortable with silence as well, I think is really important.
With our strategies for success, one of our speakers, her big thing is always Be curious, not furious. She reminds us
Like
throughout the whole sessions, be curious, not furious. So that one
love
is
that.
sticking in my head. I didn't even have to
That's
write that one down. That one's an easy one to
Awesome.
remember.
Yeah, I love that.
So we've covered some of these already, and on the fourth question, and it looks like spell check changed a word. What are your tips and suggestions for a positive outcome? Not a position outcome, a positive outcome. I just realized that that's what was typed in.
So I looked at that question and said, I don't know what that is, and just went on. I didn't try to guess what the word was.
I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be positive.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think we've kind of addressed that is just, you know, I think what Laura said is what would great look like? What is the success that we're looking for? What would we like to walk away with today? You know, where would we like to be? Those are just, you know, and again, assuming positive intent, you know, just being very clear on that.
Laura.
Can I get specific again?
Sure.
Because I want to address the attire issue that is that is it's just kind of in the back of my mind. In that situation, you know, we try to say, oh, don't take it personally, but now we're actually about someone's personal attire and what they're wearing. And for you to be able to come into the conversation from a place of empathy of, hey, Jane, you know, I'm feeling very uncomfortable even sharing this with you. And I can't imagine how I would feel if I was going to have this, if someone was coming to me with this conversation. And share with her the input that you've received, and say to her, you know, how does that make you feel? Because I think we need to honor where people are, and you know, maybe, and I don't know her situation, and maybe you do more, but I'm going to give you an example that this is not my own client, but it's just a situation where a gentleman was not getting on his Zoom. He was not coming on video. And his boss kind of had a little microaggressive, like in the chat box, like, oh, why aren't you on? And then he finally came on video. To find out later that his wife is an ER nurse and his son is autistic and can't handle all of the distractions. And that is why he wasn't on video. But he was getting, you know, little digs here and there from everybody else because he was the only one that was not on video. So I don't know her situation. You know, maybe she's caring for someone and she doesn't have time to like get ready, and you know, so that's why I'm saying I really think that you need to dig more deeply into what is from a place of empathy, into, you know, what is occurring in her household. We have so many things going on. Maybe she's depressed. I mean, you don't know. And that's where you need to put your chief empathy hat on, right? Your chief empathy officer hat on, so that you can let her share how she's feeling, and then come to a conclusion that feels good for both of you, whatever that looks like.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I know her situation. She has stresses, but she has no children. She's living at home with her parents who keep away. So.
And even if you know her situation, ask her to describe it to you. Ask her to share what's going on in her world. Yeah. Don't assume you know, because there are things that you may not know.
And then, I mean, is it the facts, you know, it's been brought to my attention that your attire is distracting. Is that not something that is brought up, or should it be? Those are facts. There's no emotion in that, right?
May I offer? I think that sort of going at it straight shooting like that is great after you find out what the background is. And one of the things I would recommend as a solution is to offer her a uniform top to wear. So does she work for you? And is it Linda? Is that your name? Does she work for you?
You're on mute, Linda.
Yep. I got to find the little clicker to unmute.
Okay.
Yes, she does. She's one of my financial advisors, and she comes from Colorado and is used to a very relaxed dress code.
Which I understand. So it's funny. I mean, I started my company as an executive image consulting firm. So clothing is definitely a part of the messages that we're sending to people, especially in an environment like this. So I mean, I would recommend that if your company doesn't have a polo or something that she can wear every day, then assign one. So, your uniform is, make a suggestion where perhaps she can just wear. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
So then she should always wear that. That should be her uniform. So
yeah, but the problem is, if I may, Carla, she does, but she doesn't wear a bra. And so, her nipples are right there in your face. And we've got the polo shirts, but if you're wearing a thin polo shirt, which she has, and it's a light color to add to it, so do I buy her a dark? I mean, I can buy her a dark, heavy, thick polo.
I would suggest clearly the conversation needs to be had, but some of the solutions, I think, when we have these conversations with our subordinates, with leaders, and we also have to come to the table with a solution. And what is the solution? The solution is that you can, if you at home and you feel like you're at home and you don't want to, even though you're at work, there's that fine line that we have to understand, that when you log on right here, you're at work. And when you're at work, you're representing my company. And there's an image standard that we have for our company, and it has to be adhered to. And if there is no professional dress or Zoom policy, I would really recommend that you create one. But then, also she can lift her camera where you can only see her from the neck up. So those are some solutions. Exactly, just like that. So those are some solutions that she can use as a workaround for if she decides she wants to burn her bra like from the 60s. You know what I mean?
Great suggestions.
Thank you. Next question. And Laura, what do I do if things go sideways?
I'm laughing because yesterday I was on a call, and in the meeting, the other technology guy, actually, you're going to have to excuse my language, called the other guy a prick.
Ouch.
That's it. Yeah. Walk away. Walk away. Compose yourself. And if it's that emotional, I mean, that's what I would do. I would say, hey, I need to walk away. So.
And I guess on Zoom, it's, hey, I need to take a break.
Hey, I need, bio break, whatever it is, yep. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're always, when it goes sideways, that is when it is not going to serve you to sit in that moment. It just isn't. You need to create space to regroup.
I agree that, sometimes it gets heated and I say, time out, there's too much emotion in the room. We need to do time out. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Everybody sleep on it, kind of a thing. But also if it's done in front of, there's also something about values that I want to, as a leader, say, we don't talk this way. That's not who we are. We respect each other, and I will not endorse, I will not allow this kind of behavior. So there's two parts to it. One is cool off. The other part is it's not our values. That's not how we behave.
Yeah. Very.
So I think sideways or south or whatever it is happens so often. And again, go back to we're humans and our emotions. But one of the things that I started doing, I guess maybe 2 years ago, and I think, you know, for anybody that's a leader in a business, anything, is to really create some kind of a team alliance or a company alliance, and where you get agreement on what's going to happen when things go south or sideways. And so that you have some of those things built in about taking a time out, or just saying, you know what, I have to think about that. Let me get back to you. And whatever you need to compose yourself and come back. I agree with what Genevieve shared about it is up to a leader to set the tone for a organization. But if the leader doesn't do it, it can be done elsewhere as well. And so I think it's just really important to kind of know from yourself how you want to show up when things do get into that space, and how you want to help others with that. And so again, just having a strategy, and like Laura said, time for a break. Those are, you know, those work. And,
Yeah.
and you know, and just saying, I need a moment to think about that, or I need some time to think about it, allows you to get out of that hijacked brain and come back to who you are and who you want to be and how you want to show up.
And something specific that you can do is when you get off this call, you can identify what I call parking lot points. 3 statements for yourself that you will interchange, you know, so you're not sounding like a parakeet repeating over and over again, but 3 statements of how you're going to pull yourself out, whatever that looks like, you know. So need to take a bio break, whatever they are, whatever feels comfortable for you. In your own words, come up with your parking lot phrases, 2 to 3.
Thank you. So our last question, and then if we have some time, we'll open it up for any kind of discussion or further questions. And Barry, we're starting with you. Is it possible to have a difficult conversation in a group setting? If yes, how to have difficult conversation and keep it productive without turning it into a defending match? And here's the example that was given. At management meetings with representatives from different departments, raising a difficult topic in particular when there is a problem or weakness that is a collective issue can be a slippery slope.
So that was a lot of questions in one, but to start off with, assuming we didn't know that last part, if it involves a group, I would start with, does it involve everybody in the group? Because, and they do, it is clarified down there, but just if it doesn't involve everybody in the group, again, why am I doing it here? Does it need to be done here? Can it be done outside of here? To go back to like even Jessica's question, when to bring something up and when not to, because you have to think about what the outcome you want and who needs to be part of that conversation. But going with the last part is sort of this curiosity and seeking to understand are 2 ways to keep it open and out of the defensive space. And again, to keep it factual as opposed to emotional, and to be really clear on what needs to be brought up, what you want to accomplish, and how to bring it up in ways that are, you know, less personal. And, you know, it's just really interesting because I've done a lot of training over the last couple of years, which I haven't used because I'm not doing so much of the group setting, but there are some really great exercises out there that can be used with groups to help people see their blind spots, to help people to see who they are when something happens and how they go, to really build better teams and better businesses. So like on something like this, I would love whoever asked that question, I'd love to be able to share something specific with them, you know, just as, you know, being part of this group, because that's a really interesting question. But depending on, where the slippery slope is, there are different exercises to really be able to have a good conversation that addresses all that.
Laura.
I wholeheartedly believe that conflict needs to come forward in group settings. And I look at it through the lens of an executive team. Because the more that they can manage and move through the conflict, the more effective that they can be with one another. And it has to do with psychological safety, being able to, you know, ask those difficult questions. And one of the, and when you're in that moment, you know, for those of you who have been in those executive conversations where people are disagreeing on everything, one of the questions that is a go-to question is, what don't we know? And that may sound counterintuitive because now you're kind of focusing on the problem, but it's getting everybody out of that confirmation bias position of, okay, well, what don't we know? We're all sitting here, oh, I think it's this, oh, I think it's this, I think it's so to get everybody to hone in on what they don't know in that meeting is like, oh yeah, well, I guess we really don't know this. And now you can redirect that and bring it back to the higher purpose of and the meaning of the conversation. So I think conflict is very important. Conflict is what creates innovation, quite frankly. I mean, it is an exchange of ideas, and some people disagree with those. And you just have to put it on a barometer of, well, you know, to what level do we want conflict, you know, in our organization? When is it healthy, and when does it turn, you know, detrimental? So.
Great, thank you.
And
so,
just to
go ahead, yeah, keep go ahead, please.
Yeah, because to build on what Laura just said, because she's absolutely right, and that is a good question that leads to those blind spots. What's the blind spot here? Sometimes it's the quiet person in the room, so being able to address who's not speaking in the room and asking, well, what do you think about this? Well, it does put them on the spot. Sometimes it gives them the opportunity to get their voice out there, because everybody's voice is important. And usually conflict arises because of, you know, not supporting something, and maybe somebody who's trying to avoid it just like lets it go. But it is important to hear all voices of the system.
This is Carolina Rivas. I'm the one that had that question. And that's a real life example, clearly. And Tracy Cochran, who's listening, will relate to that. And what's difficult is that you gave great pointers already. I really appreciate it, because everything that has been discussed so far helps. Definitely when you've been working with the same group for a long time, you start to behave almost like a family, and everybody kind of takes their roles. And I think that translates even where you are dealing with facts, the emotions and the personalities and the labels start getting on the way of, and I like when we're discussing about assumptions and the blind spots and all of that. And I can tell you that every management team that we have, it's quite a study on conflict, one way or another. So sometimes more productive than others. But in general, I think so far everything that has been discussed, I really appreciate it. And I can address specifics if necessary.
So Carolina, I'd be happy to like share more, and, you know, and kind of, if you told me a little bit more, I like what exercise, but there's so many great things out there that are available that, you know, I'd be happy to share.
You know, one of the, and maybe this is something that has nothing to do with the communication and the conflict skills as it is the underlying, the core issue that's causing so much conflict and emotion. And quite honestly, I think it's too much to get done in very little time with very little resources, and having everybody's priority be a sense of urgency and not being able to get to all of it. Just that alone, it's like already a recipe for a negative outcome or not satisfactory to anybody. And you have to work with those conditions to go forward and try to address specific issues or facts that are happening. So that I think it's maybe the core of our dynamics.
And I think Laura's question of what don't we know is really important, because even in priorities, what don't we know? Like, why is this the priority? Maybe this should be the priority. I think that's a great question. You know, if you think about information, we know what we know what we don't know. Both of those are known. But then there's all this other stuff that we don't know it until it's known. And so how do we bring out that information is probably the most important thing as a leader. Good. And so I think Laura's question just dives right into that.
Perfect. And I'll go and add one more point. When we were talking before on sideway, it's interesting because in a group setting, sideway sometimes doesn't come with an insult. Sideway comes with a very polite way of maybe pointing a finger, and that still is very detrimental to advance in any communication, I think.
And that's where this group alliance for teams is so powerful, because the team, when they start working together, they agree on a couple of areas, and then it keeps coming out, and it stays, it's a living document until the team doesn't exist anymore. As new people come into it, sometimes it has to be revisited, but it's a really powerful document for keeping people in check of how they want to show up.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much.
So we have about 9 more minutes before Jessica's going to close this up. And any additional questions on anything that was asked or talked about, anything that you'd like to share?
I have another question that's general based on everything that was discussed. How do you know, there's the different, I suppose, approach or personalities when it comes to conflict and how comfortable somebody might be or not with conflict. You talked about how to handle it when you're not comfortable with conflict, but what about any techniques or pointers on how to handle a difficult discussion with somebody that's not comfortable, or it's conflict avoidance on their part?
I would say, I think we all have a degree of conflict avoidance within us. It depends what the topic is. And therefore, I wouldn't necessarily shift anything that we've brought here to this conversation, I do believe is applicable to someone that is conflict avoidant, or even more conflict avoidant than
higher
you
degree.
Are. Yeah. I don't see a huge distinction there.
Perfect.
I think what's most important is to create, to focus on you know, the commonalities of the person that you're moving into this conflict with. And that goes back to just tribal type things, right? Where, you know, our tribe, like, okay, this is how we work in the tribe together. So whatever those are, maybe they're common values, maybe they're common objectives within the organization. And maybe you're working for the same boss, and you know, you need to come into that conversation, and that's going to help peel back the onion to that agitation that percolates underneath any type of level of conflict.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, Linda.
Yeah, you know, one of the again, this is just, I'm taking notes like crazy. Thank you everybody for your good ideas. One of the things that I know helps center me, and it's simple but it's difficult, is just before you're having the conversation, take some time and breathe.
Yeah, that's so true.
Just breathe. Take, you know, the other day I literally went on my phone and I found a 5-minute Andrew Weil breathing exercise, because I was getting into a tough spot, and I could feel, if you listen to your body, I think women are particularly adept at listening to our bodies. And if your body just doesn't feel right, get yourself in a place where you do feel right physically. And then you're so much better prepared to get into these difficult situations. So that's something that I try to do.
That's awesome. And, you know, one of a component, like the collateral beauty of COVID is we are working from our homes, and we can create that sacred space for us. You know, maybe it's going into where you're finding yourself picking up, maybe some of you have animals, pick up your cat, pet your dog. I mean, that in itself upregulates your oxytocin levels, and that will definitely lower your blood pressure and your heart rate. So there are little things that we have just in our surroundings, whether, you know, we can look at it as, hey, we're stuck here, or wow, look at this little, you know, creative, calm bubble that I now have, versus being in an office where you don't have that, you know, escape. So figure out what that escape hatch is for you. And for you, Linda, it's, I'm going to breathe. For me, I'll sometimes sit on phone with clients and I've got my cat on my lap. So.
I put the photo of who's now my 24-year-old daughter, but when she was with my mom and she was doing dress up with my mom and she was 4. And I put that just to the right of me, and when I know that there could be a difficult conversation. And
one thing I'd like to suggest to Carolina is ask questions. If we can just ask questions, if you think or you have witnessed that other people have difficulty with conflict, because like Laura said, we all have, you know, we have some level of conflict that we don't want to face. But asking questions of the other person helps soften the situation and let them talk about, and then you can just listen for those cues and figure out, well, which cue do you think is a good one to tackle at the moment as you work your way through whatever the resolution is that you're looking to get to. Because asking questions allows the other person to feel like they're heard. And all we want to do is feel like we're heard. We all want to be heard. And sometimes in a big group setting, it's very difficult for people to, you know, speak out. But if we can do it one-on-one, you know, I know you were a little bit quiet. Do you have any issues or any questions? Things like that. And you talk to them about it from that level, then that may help them also in the next situation, but it'll also help you get to whatever the resolution is, or to figure out what you're trying to uncover.
Excellent, thank you. I wanted to ask too, or share, that I've noticed, and not necessarily in a group setting like the one that I gave, but in general, with this working remotely conditions, it seems to me that we're losing the human touch on the day-to-day, just small talk, or you're taking a coffee break or something, you're talking about a topic that is not set on an agenda because you're walking from one meeting to another. And I think that now that we're going into 6 months, that's starting to show a little bit on the relationships and on the communications, where I'm looking to ways of having that rapport not be lost, and not only getting to a conversation with a person because you're sitting in a meeting with an agenda that needs to be tackled within an hour because you're running to the next one. I'm not sure what the group thinks about that or what you've seen.
Well, we've only got 2 minutes to finish, to wrap it up. If you can wrap it up quickly, but that segues perfectly into what our TCI talk is this month.
I'll just say, I was on a Women Corporate Directors Summit last week for the last 3 days, and that came up because boards are getting together 12 times a year versus 5 times a year now. This is what's happening. And it's a very simple thing. Pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. That's your new cooler talk. Pick up the phone. Don't text. Don't Teams. Don't pick up the phone.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And so Jess, close us out with the TCI talk. And I know you put it in chat.
Yep. So I put the registration link in the chat. It's next week, Wednesday. And it's on COVID stress, effectively managing conflict within workplace caused by the COVID crisis. And it's going to be hosted by Michelle Martinez. And our speaker will be a partner at her law firm and at Kelly Cronenberg. And it's Angelo, I'm going to butcher his name, Filippi. Felipe Pie, maybe. But he'll be our speaker next week, and it's 8:30 to 10.
Right.
Right.
So thank you, everyone. Great conversations. Thank you, Barry, Laura, for serving as our experts. As always, we come away with valuable information, and we appreciate you. And we appreciate everyone giving their input and sharing of their thoughts and ideas. So have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and practice being uncomfortable with those uncomfortable being comfortable with those uncomfortable conversations. Bye,
Have a
everyone.
great
Thank you.
weekend and
Thank you.
Happy New Year to everyone who's celebrating.
That's right.
This book is good
Happy
too.
New Year.
Perfect. Difficult conversation. I'll have to get that one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.